My name is Kevin Richardson. I am a senior user experience architect here at Infragistics, and today I will be talking about the user experience of Windows 8. A little bit about me to begin with. I've been working in the area of user experience for a long time, over 20 years. I have experience across business verticals. I've done research, evaluation, design, management, you name it. And on the weekends, for 2013, I will be riding for Infragistics Racing. So if you're on the East Coast, give us a shout and maybe come down and watch me race. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the user experience of Windows 8. I want to talk about four main areas today. I'd like to talk about application level information architecture. I want to talk about screen level organization, about some primary interaction models, and about the overall design philosophy that Microsoft is suggesting and what that means in terms of different application types. First off then, information architecture. Typically what you have in any application is a hierarchical model or a flat model. Really, you kind of only have one of these two choices. The usual application models we find today are built around hierarchical information architectures. This is common, complex software applications, websites today. Windows 8, however, suggests a flat model. This is what we typically find with things like games or forms, document creation, things that have linear flows. Now, unfortunately, most applications are too complex to live within a strictly flat model. So, in order to split the difference, what Windows 8 does is create an overarching design that favors flat, but allows for a hierarchical representation of information. And what Windows 8 does is give us levels. And I just want to play a short clip here, so bear with me for a moment.
Coming in? Oh yeah! I forgot all about it. Hey! How'd you do? We won! We're in the finals on Wednesday. Yeah! What is this about? I'm completely changing the configuration of the apartment. You're not gonna believe it when you see it. Whole new lifestyle. What are you doing? Levels. Levels? Yeah, I'm getting rid of all my furniture. All of it. And I'm gonna build these different levels. You know, with steps. And it'll all be carpeted. A lot of pillows. You know, like ancient Egypt. You drew up plans for this? No, it's all in my head. I don't see how you can get comfortable like that. Oh, I'll be comfortable.
Alright, so maybe we don't have ancient Egypt, but Windows 8 really is all about levels. It looks hierarchical, but what you have is something more like this, where we have a linear flow, but a stacked linear flow of different levels. This allows Microsoft to maintain that central design tenet of Windows 8, which is to flatten content and minimize the need for navigation. It also allows all of the content at a particular level to be visible and available to the user. A laudable goal, a bit of a mixed metaphor, I think, but let's see how this plays out. Now, I'll come back to these three levels all throughout the rest of the presentation. It's enough for the moment to know that the first level, the uppermost level, is called the hub. Then we have a section level followed by a detail level. Now, let's walk through how this metaphor gets realized. And it's realized through two important design principles. The first is the fold, or what we used to call the fold. In Windows 8 on a Surface, the screen height is fixed, but the screen width isn't. So really, we don't have a fold anymore. What we do have is a crease. And I'd give this to Microsoft for free. You guys can start using the word crease with my thanks. The display of the content now wraps horizontally, and really this is kind of an interesting replay on an old issue. We used to have vertical scrolling, which was good, and horizontal scrolling, which was bad. You never wanted to design a page that required horizontal scrolling. Now we don't have vertical scrolling at all, and horizontal scrolling is the only game in town, and it's good. My question here for anyone who's doing human factors user experience research is, what happens to this related information that gets appended on to the far right hand side of whatever the information we happen to be looking at is? There was a question in the traditional hierarchical model where we had vertical scrolling that asked whether or not anyone would ever read the information that was appended to the bottom. Now we have the same sort of issue. It's just, will anybody read the information appended to the far right? I don't have that, but I expect somebody will be doing that work pretty soon. The other thing that enables this metaphor to work successfully is this idea of panning. Since all of the information is now added to the far right of whatever I'm looking at, there is a new mental model which suggests that instead of there being a whole lot of content below the screen, now there's a whole lot of content to the right of the screen, and simply by swiping I can quickly access whatever there is relevant to me at the time. Now let's talk a little bit about organization and how content gets organized by level and at the screen level as well. At the topmost part, as I mentioned before, there are hub pages. I'm going to try and keep to that news sample website I showed before. At the hub level, think of this as dashboards. We have a main dashboard, which is the hub here. Think of this as the Uber dashboard, the super dashboard, which pulls maybe the most important story from each of the main categories of this application, of this website. And for my example, I could be pulling something from the main news story, the main sports story, the main entertainment story, the main political story. All of that would be bubbled up here to the hub. To the right of the hub, as I pan across, are the dashboards for each of the sections. So in the news dashboard, I'll have a subset of the most important, the most recent, whatever stories that are applicable in news, and likewise for whatever section 2, 3, and 4 are. So in my example here, my hub is this area on the left where I have my overarching number of top stories, maybe one from each category, and then to the right of that, the categories themselves and the most important stories within those categories. The second level are the sections. I have the news section called out here, so if I chose the news section, I would land in an area that looks like this, and here I would have all of my subsections within news, maybe world news followed by local news followed by news section C, news section D, whatever they happen to be. These are no longer hubs. These are headlines, if you will, of all of the stories within that particular section, and then I could obviously choose one of those stories to go see that in detail. So keeping with my example, I have all of my news, U.S. news stories, and then to the right of that, all of my world news stories. If I select a particular story from either the hub level or the section category level, I land in a detail page. This is my third level. And here I have whatever story I selected, followed by the remaining stories or related stories, however the application happens to be organized, to the right of that. So I'll get to see all of the information I was looking for, and then if I continue swiping to the right, panning to the right, I will see all of the related information there. And here's just an example of what that would look like as information wraps to the right. So just as an overview, I have 3 levels in a typical Windows 8 application. First level, remember, is the hub level. Second level is the category level. And the third level is the detail level. Now, how do people interact with content? I want to talk about 4 models, the 4 primary interaction models. The first is the header or the app bar. We're talking about navigation here. How do I access different section levels within my application? There are 2 ways I can do that. The first is via this drop-down menu, which is built into the header. This is good if I have a lot of sections in my application. The second way is through the app bar. This drops down from the top if I swipe from the bezel up or down, and I can view all of my different categories there. Obviously, not as useful if I have a lot of categories because there's a limited amount of space that I have available to me. If I'm looking at application-specific actions or actions that are contextually relevant to the page I'm currently viewing, those are available via the app bar that comes up from the bottom of the screen. These are all hidden as a matter of course and are available to the user when you swipe from the bezel. This one will give me things like the ability to view the information on screen in a different view, list view or a map view, the ability to filter information, to sort it, to create something new, to add to favorites, that sort of thing. And then I have cross-application actions. Microsoft Windows 8 makes this available through what they call a charms bar. This is available as you swipe from the bezel on the right toward the center of the screen, and this houses actions that are common across all applications and allows you to provide linkages at the operating system level across applications. So I can take what I'm looking at here and share it on LinkedIn or Facebook, for instance. And the last way of interacting with information is via semantic zooming. Semantic zooming means that I can, with my fingers, I can gesture by using my thumb and forefinger to zoom in or out by pinching, it's called, and that navigates between levels within the hierarchy. So if I'm at a story level, the detail level, I can zoom out to the category level, I can zoom out further to the hub level. This requires users to have an accurate mental model of how the system is organized in order for them to predict what happens when they do that. That's going to be, I think, a little bit problematic until folks get used to this new information architecture style. So it will be a little bit odd for folks if they're using this gesture because they won't exactly know what's supposed to happen when they do it. I don't know that that's going to be a problem or not. This is still a bit new. I'll leave it to somebody in a lab to tell me whether or not people get this without a problem. Now, let's talk about design philosophy. I want to talk about three main tenets that Microsoft is providing to us, as well as what I think might result from that. The first is this idea of content before Chrome. I think this is certainly not new with Microsoft. It is certainly not a new idea. Designers have been trying to hide the non-essential components of a screen to allow people to focus on the task at hand for years and years. But content before Chrome, catchy slogan, I'm all for it. It allows people to pay attention to what's important, and rather than be distracted by all of the buttons and widgets that might be available in an application, just hide what's not necessary for the moment. The screen here on the left is from Windows 8. This is the Xbox music player. You can tell that any sort of action related to the application is built in to the display of information. So play, new, play a playlist. This is all built into the design. Whereas here we've got Pandora. This is taken off an iPad, and all of the actions available to someone are available all the time. I can choose any station at any moment. I can, choose to sort. I can go into my preferences. I can thumbs up, thumbs down something. I can do a search. I think the interesting question here, while I agree with the principle in general, is there is a line to be walked when you hide content. And by content, I mean actions available to the user. At some point, the goal towards simplicity begins to make the application more complex, more mentally challenging for the user, because they're not sure what they can do on a screen. There is probably some middle ground, and my guess is that, as with other designs before that, your better designers will create applications that tread that line well. The idea of hub pages and live tiles is another idea that Microsoft puts forward, and again, not terribly new, though the application of it is a good idea. You want to bubble up content. Use tiles to alert users to new content, to important content, to frequently changing content, rather than simply create a set of icons on a screen that opens a program for you. Pre-Windows 8, that's all you see when you sit down at your PC. Choose your program, open your program, work in your program. In fact, even iOS does this a bit. Some standard iOS programs, just take a look at your iPhone. Your email may tell you with a little toast indicator how many new messages you have. But notice the weather application that comes standard with iOS always says it's 73 degrees. Drives me crazy. And then this idea of sharing. We talked about the charms bar, but this idea of contracts in Microsoft terminology, this is top-level operating system functionality that provides the hooks to improve sharing between applications. The goal here is to make a more unified experience for a user across the different applications they have available to them, rather than focusing solely on the single application. Again, an excellent idea. It allows applications to take advantage of this operating system-based connectivity and provide a more fluid motion throughout Windows 8. The question now I have is, what's the result of this design philosophy? Well, it seems to me very clearly that what we have is an operating system that is designed toward content consumption. Maybe not a surprise if you see Windows 8 Surface as a replacement for your iPad. You're typically using your iPad to consume content, and this works quite well for that. Whether you enjoy the layout or whether or not the information architecture structure makes sense to you is, I think, an important but secondary issue. What happens here, though, is that this philosophy, the design philosophy that Microsoft is putting forth of minimizing controls, makes business-focused applications awkward, right? The idea of creating content means I need to play a more active role rather than simply consuming information. I need the tools to create it. Hiding the controls makes that more difficult for me. Now, I know there is new hardware that is being created specifically to adapt to the tablet/laptop difference of use, and perhaps even that the way I have my device configured in tablet mode or in laptop mode will define certain changes in my design philosophy, so that it's creating specific use cases. If I have it in laptop mode, I'm more concerned about content creation. If I have it in tablet mode, I'm more concerned about content consumption, and it will skew the design philosophy toward those use cases. That'll be an interesting question. We'll have to see how that goes. But for me, I'm concerned about whether or not this thing is interesting and whether or not it's useful. And I have a couple of final thoughts. I do like the idea of flattening levels of information architecture. Like I said before, this is not new, but it is a laudable goal for any design of any application. Don't make the thing more complex than it needs to be. Flatten as much as possible to allow me easy access to all of the information that's relevant at that moment. Also, the idea of content over Chrome and the idea of bubbling up content, both fine design philosophies, also not new, but something that designers should keep in mind, something that you perhaps as product or project managers should be asking your designers about. Ask, do we really need all of the buttons on this page, on every page, all the time? Probably not. Where I'm not so sure is this translation of this philosophy to the desktop or the keyboard. We've been talking about tablets so far and the gestural interface of interacting directly with the screen. Business users are going to find this awkward as they move between gestural and keyboard interactions, between gestural and mouse-based interactions. Time will tell, but I think this is going to be difficult. I think, as I've mentioned, that translating this philosophy to business or content creation applications is going to be awkward at best, and that at some point I think we're going to see the design model of that Microsoft has put forth here reverting to, at best, maybe a hybrid web Windows 8 interface, or perhaps breaking down entirely to something that's more familiar, keeping in mind maybe that these Windows 8 design tenets are guidelines. We'll see. I hope that we can create clean, information-relevant applications, but the simple fact that we're going to have to expose more controls means these things are going to start looking less and less like typical or prototypical Windows 8 applications. And then this last point here, I think, is the most important, and I haven't mentioned it until now, and it's whether or not users will be able to easily commute between Windows 8 and web iOS interfaces. There will always be a web-based interface. There will always be Apple iOS interfaces. There will always be business applications. Windows 8 is very different from these. So not only are users going to have to shift gears, change mental models between when they're using Windows 8 and when they're not. You might think, well, we'll learn what to do if I'm on my Surface, and then we'll learn what to do if I'm on the web. Where it becomes more problematic is when things like a Windows 8 application calls a website within itself, so that now within Windows 8 I am switching back and forth in the same application between one mental model and another mental model. This, I think, is more problematic and is probably a great topic for some HCI, human factors person's dissertation, and I would love to read what that is. So I think that's all I have to say today. I'd like to thank you all very much, and I hope to see you again on my next webinar. As usual, I invite you to get in touch with me. Let me know your comments. My email address is krichardson@infragistics.com, and I hope to hear from you very, very soon. Thanks very much.